Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. We are in the epiphany phase, the discovery phase of an epidemic that is the darkest that has ever occurred in our lifetimes. It is the epidemic of human and child trafficking. And this epidemic is so dark, it is so sick and disturbing that I will not put it into words. But if you have the courage to go research the stories of human and child trafficking, the stories of, for example, the Finders File, or the Franklin scandal, or the Anneke Lucas story out of Belgium, if you have the courage to go research these stories, it is so harrowing and dark that what happens is a sense of paranoia overcomes you. You become obsessed with the safety of your children. You will wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats, stressing about the safety of your children. You'll go check on them when they're safely tucked in their beds. That's how disturbing these stories are. And this epidemic of human and child trafficking, it is reaching epic levels in our lifetime, on our watch. And as we realize this, as the people of America realize that this is becoming a serious concern, and anxiety overcomes us, and a call to action, a call to arms, where we demand to our government and our police officials that this threat be eradicated from our lives and society be returned to what it was like when I was a child in the 1970s and the 1980s, when children could play outside without a care. They could play outside even after dark. We would play football for hours on end, many times going late into the evening without a care. Whereas today, with this rising epidemic, those type of simple activities are becoming increasingly a mortal threat, a mortal danger. And so we have this call to arms, this call to action. We confront our government and our police officials, and they rush to the scene and assure us that they are taking care of this epidemic. They are taking action. They are handling it. They are on the job. But the question that we have to ask ourselves, is that really the case? Are they really taking care of it? Do they actually intend to take care of it? Or are they pacifying us? Are they slowing us down, removing our sense of urgency, removing our momentum, and getting us to accept that this sick reality will be with us in perpetuity? 40 years ago, Nancy Reagan declared the war on drugs. And 40 years later, with ever-increasing budgets, not a dent has been made on the drug epidemic. Drug use and the drug epidemic are at serious heights. And we've done our jobs as citizens. We've given our government officials, our leaders, every nickel, dime, cent, and penny that they asked for to eradicate this threat. But it still persists. Or I have another example for you, the AIDS epidemic. The AIDS epidemic was also started about 40 years ago. And when it was started, our government officials told us that they were ready to take care of this. And there was a small budget applied to managing the AIDS epidemic, a small budget for curing and containing AIDS. And here we are 40 years later, and AIDS still exists. And that tiny budget from 40 years ago today is a staggering amount. And there's a lot of people that have made a lot of money on attempting to cure AIDS. And today, there is a large number of governmental employees that are working to contain and cure AIDS. But the question is, if they cure AIDS, then they don't have a job anymore. So the question becomes, do they actually intend to do it? You see, what police officials do with these type of epidemics is they're always doing Band-Aid, tape-over fixes, short-term fixes, like putting duct tape on a sinking ship. They put these Band-Aid tape-overs on the fixes, but they never go to the root issue. And what happens is, while they pacify us, these epidemics only increase in number, increase in magnitude, and increase in volume. And what our government officials today, what our police officials are doing to tell us that they are tackling human trafficking, is they're taking a concept, it's a version of what they learned from a reality show. It's called the Chris Hansen Show to Catch a Predator. And what they do, what our police officials do, is they attempt to replicate that show to some extent. And what they do is they pose as prostitutes, and they go on social media platforms and they bait buyers. They lure buyers in. And then they entrap them in a hotel setting. And the police officer jumps out of the closet and the man is arrested. And my question for you is, does that sound like the comprehensive solution needed to cure human trafficking? Replicating something that was learned on a reality show. Does that sound like what's needed? Because what the police do is they argue that they're tackling demand. They're going to go and arrest these men, and that's going to lessen demand, and that's going to fix the problem. And see, they can tackle demand or they can tackle supply. And see, but if you tackle supply, you're taking on the cartels. The cartels with all of their money and their influence and their resources and their connections at the highest level of government. And so the question becomes, do our police officials really want to go down that route? Are they simply choosing the lesser route, the easier route to pacify the public and give themselves a pass? Because if you tackle the root issue, if you tackle distribution, if you tackle supply, then you remove the whole element. There is no demand for buying it. It's gone. And so that begs the question, do they intend to do it? You see, when the public sees an epidemic, we demand that the epidemic is removed. But when government officials see an epidemic, they see a budget line item that they can build, grow, and expand. And what they see is they see job security. They know they can retire from that, they can build a career off of tackling this with their Band-Aid solutions. And you see, right now, again, child trafficking, human trafficking has always existed, but it was at a minimal level. It is only today that it is reaching these heights. And the question is why? Our southern border is completely wide open right now. And in the past so many years, 130,000 fighting-age men have come over that border. And many of them come with a person in tow, a person held captive. And when they get on this side of the border, they deliver that person to their cartel counterpart, and then they're unemployed. They're unemployed and they're in our neighborhoods. They're in our cities and towns. They're unemployed and they have no inventory. But they have one skill, and it is a very sophisticated, unique skill, and it is human abduction. And that skill pays a pretty penny. And at that point in time, we all know what will happen. They will begin scoping out our neighborhoods, our towns, our parks, our children walking home from schools, our playgrounds, our women, our daughters, our wives, walking in dimly lit grocery store parking lots in evenings. And there's only one group that has the ability to take this sick business and create it at an industrial level, to create efficiencies in it. And they have the resources, the ability. It is only the cartels that can do this. You see, the common criminal doesn't have the ability to pull off this kind of operation, and they don't have this kind of evil. It's only one group that does it. And so, if you take, I talked earlier about the drug trade, and the drug epidemic started 40 years ago. 40 years later, it's growing, and in my life, I've lost to drug violence and drug use. I've lost at least 5 people. How many people have you lost to drug violence and drug use? I'm certain that most people in the listening audience have lost someone. So does that mean in 5 or 10 years that we will be able to say the same about human trafficking? That in 5 or 10 years, you will know that one of your loved ones was lost to it, was thrown in the back of a van and driven down 59 to the Mexican border, never to be seen again? Can you imagine that sick, dark reality, losing someone to that nightmare? And so this is the question of our time. And right now, you have 3 types of police officials. 3 types. You have, at the county level, you have the county sheriff, and then you have the county district attorney. And then in the city level, you have the city police chief. And none of them want to talk about the border, because of those three types of police officials, there's two types within those categories. There are Democrats and there are Republicans that are afraid of Democrats. And you see, the reason that they don't want to talk about the border and the cartels, the reason that they spend their time on these stings that will have no real impact on the issue, is because it is Democrat policy that created the environment that we now have, an environment that is fertile for human trafficking. Because it is the Democrats' actions that have caused the disintegration of our border. It is the Democrats' actions that have caused this insurmountable wave of people coming over our border that cannot be managed. It is the Democrats that are responsible for this to some extent. And so they don't want to talk about it. And the question becomes, when they run these police stings, when they run these police operations, are they really providing cover for the cartels? That's the question. Because as they are running these police stings and they're pacifying you, and you're going home saying, oh, it's good. You're telling your wife or your husband, oh, honey, it's okay. We're good. We're safe. The police have us taken care of. While they're doing that, the cartels are building the distribution channel to make human trafficking an efficient, slick business. So these are the questions of our times. This is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we will give you all of the content, the information, and the ideas for you to take back your governments. We'll give you those ideas, and then the ball's in your court to do something about it. And clearly, we are giving you one set of ideas that are very impactful. And clearly, we are giving you one message, which is, it is time to confront our county officials at the county commissioner courts, our city officials at the town hall meetings, with these hard questions, and not take their one-over answers as a solution to this problem. And with that being said, I have my guest on the show, Kim Kelly. And Kim Kelly is a survivor of human trafficking, and I'm going to go ahead and allow Kim, let me see if I got to press this button here. Kim, are you there? Apologize, having a little bit of a technical difficulty. This is the Chris Heasley Show, and trying to get Kim on the line here. Please, getting technical assistance now. I think I have to hit this button over here. Okay, there we go. Kim, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Oh, goodness gracious. I apologize. I'm still a rookie with regard to manning this audio station, but I apologize for the delay. I apologize
no problem.
for that.
You're doing great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything. And with that being said, Kim Kelly has spoken in Fort Bend County on this issue. She is lighting people up, creating great amounts of awareness with it. And with that being said, Kim, we've heard you speak in the past, and I'd like your take on human trafficking. I'd like to hear your story, and the floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I want to first tell the audience, first of all, acknowledging the fact that there are very few media outlets that are willing to even talk about this. And that's a pretty horrifying reality that we live in, when grown adults are unwilling to face the type of exploitation, the type of harm that children are experiencing on a daily basis. So, Chris, thank you for not only featuring this message, but for caring and for taking action. It matters. So for the audience, my name is Kim. I am a survivor of child trafficking. Today, I combat child trafficking. I've worked with various nonprofits in the fight against child trafficking in the United States. And I emphasize the United States because I need people to know that, yes, human trafficking, child trafficking is a global issue, and yes, it's bad everywhere. And I'll tell you more about my story, but I can speak from personal experience, having been born and raised overseas, where trafficking was one of the many forms of abuse that myself and around 25,000 children endured as I was growing up. So that being said, yes, it's terrible everywhere. Let's not even pretend to justify the horrors that are happening all around the world. But I need people to realize that the United States is actually the main problem. I don't think people are willing to acknowledge the fact that the United States is the main source and destination of human trafficking in the entire world. This is not just a far, far away problem. The United States is the main problem. And the United States has yet to implement even a reasonable effort to combat this. So I'm going to start with a series of rhetorical questions because I'm here to help people unpack the logic for themselves. I'm not here to tell people what to think, but I am here to call people to action because, America, we must do better. So here's the rhetorical question. First, I'm going to set this stage with some statistics. Now, I want people to realize that statistics are only based on what's reported, and the majority of human trafficking, the majority of crimes are not reported. These people are not filing taxes. So keep that in mind. These statistics are proven. In my opinion, they are simply the tip of the iceberg. But let's stick with what's proven. Human trafficking is at least the second largest criminal enterprise on the planet. We're talking about, oversimplified, the sale and exploitation of humans. Now, there are various forms of human trafficking, ways people can be trafficked: labor, sex, domestic servitude, and a lot of other bad things. Let's narrow that down to children being trafficked. Now, let's narrow that down further to children being sex trafficked. What if I told you that in the United States alone, child sex trafficking generates at least $50 billion every single year within our country, in our nation? $50 billion a year on paper, reported. Realize that that's more than all professional sports combined. That's more than most large corporations. $50 billion a year on the sexual exploitation and sale of children. Now, just to put this into perspective, we are not, quote, talking about child sexual abuse, because that's a whole other nasty spectrum. We are specifically talking about child sex trafficking, and I will further define that later. Now, some other statistics that might shock you. It is probably the most profitable criminal enterprise on the planet. Like I said, it's at least the second largest. It's also the fastest growing. This criminal enterprise has a faster growth rate than drugs and arms and all the other bad things in the world. So here's the rhetorical question. Why does the federal government not have a dedicated agency that's focused on combating human trafficking? Earlier, Chris was talking about the war on drugs. And let me just be real. None of us are asking, I'm going to speak to the audience in this one situation, none of us are necessarily asking for more government involvement in anything. And I'm definitely not pretending like the government would necessarily be effective at combating this corruption. I am drawing your attention to the fact that they're not even pretending to care. There's not even a pretend effort to combat this. I'm going to say more things to help you unpack the logic for all the listeners here. Yes, I hope this makes you mad, but don't worry, there are solutions, and we will discuss that, because I'm not just here to make you shake your fist or be paranoid. I'm here to call you to action, and I hope you'll join me in doing so. So, back to the rhetorical question. Now, unfortunately, let me just give you a spoiler alert. The answer to all my rhetorical questions, rhetorical means I'm asking this for the sake of making the point, not because I really don't know the answer. The answer to these rhetorical questions, in a nutshell, is that child sex trafficking in the United States generates at least $50 billion every year. Keep that in mind. Next rhetorical question. Why have we never heard the topic of child sex trafficking brought up on the presidential debate stages? Never, ever, not even one guy. Now, I look at politics like pro wrestling, and I encourage you to do the same, because to me, the political theatrics have never been real. And I grew up in third world countries where there's an understanding that politics are simply theatrics and they're not actually for the people. But for the grown adults in the United States who still think that their guy is going to solve this problem, or that it's a Team Red or a Team Blue issue, once again, why aren't politicians even willing to talk about this? I want you to think, and I want you to make a list in your head about how many politicians you've heard even talk about this. Make sounds with their mouth. If you look at politicians like salespeople, why would you not add the topic of protecting children to your sales pitch? Another rhetorical question. Wouldn't everybody care? Wouldn't that unite us all? Wouldn't Team Red and Team Blue possibly be united around this cause of protecting the innocent? Now, if they're not even making sounds with their mouth about it, much less willing to take action, and yes, I've overthought this and I've researched this, there are less than 10 United States politicians who have made some sounds with their mouth about child sex trafficking in the United States. I'm going to forego the slow applause, and I'm going to ask people, is that acceptable that our tax dollars are funding these elected leaders whose job it is to protect and serve, and who are either unwilling or unable, said differently, to corrupt, to talk about child sex trafficking in the United States, much less take action? I'm going to go ahead and say that's not okay with any of us. Now, the fact that we don't know about this is intentional. The fact that child trafficking is thriving in the United States is intentional. If it's not intentional, the other option is that it's incompetence. And I'll let you figure out if either way it's acceptable that our elected officials are either unwilling or incapable of protecting children, or even talking about protecting children. So I'm setting the premise in this way to help people understand this is the point. Child trafficking, the sale and exploitation of children, is thriving in this country by design. It's not a mistake. It's not something that accidentally happens every time it rains. It's because it is the most profitable criminal enterprise on the planet. It's because our elected officials are too corrupt, too weak, too cowardly to even talk about this, much less do something about it. Now, I have a lot more statistics, and once again, statistics are barely scratching the tip of the iceberg, but I need to quantify this for people so that they understand how lied to we have been, how bad this situation is, and quite frankly, how solvable this problem is. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story so that you understand where I'm coming from, why I'm so passionate about this, and why I've stepped into the fray to do something about this, why I'm here talking about this and making sounds with my mouth, even though I shouldn't have to be the one unpacking my trauma for people in the world to start recognizing that this matters and that we need to do something about this. I shouldn't be the one who has to be here, correct? I shouldn't have to be the one combating child trafficking. Now, I come from a pretty, not going to lie, terrible childhood. I would not wish that on any child. I'm going to summarize a very long story. I was born and raised in a religious cult. This was an international religious cult. There were tens of thousands of people all around the world, and there were tens of thousands of children, mostly American children, that were born and raised all around the world. And trafficking was one of the many forms of abuse. I escaped this cult when I was 20 years old. Now, unfortunately, we were never rescued. We were never part of the statistics you'll never read. But there are two reasons that I did not suffer worse abuse as a child. I'm going to tell you that part of this story. One of the reasons is that I was lucky enough to be the youngest of my siblings, and because I was born last, due to the time frame I was born, I experienced the least amount of terrible things, because around the time I was born, in the late 80s, enough people had escaped this cult and raised awareness and notified local and international authorities, and local and international authorities conducted a coordinated series of raids. There were several raids all around the world in various countries and continents, where local authorities don't form these compounds. They arrested the adults and they put the children into institutions. I'm going to speed up this very long story for the sake of making some important points. One of them is that there's a misconception that children are able to escape these types of environments. A child is not physically or mentally capable of outsmarting or overpowering a predatory adult, much less hundreds of adults. But let's pretend that 5-year-old, 8-year-old me in Brazil, 10, 14-year-old me in Mexico, let's pretend that 8-year-old me in Brazil was able to somehow make it past the adults and the security and the dogs and the jump over the wall. Let's pretend that I was physically able to escape. Play along with me here. Then where would I have gone? Jump over the wall and then run down the street and go where? I don't exist on paper. I'm an American child in a third world country. Where would I have gone? Would it have been safer for me out there on the street? So let me first debunk the misconception that a child is somehow able to escape this life. Now let me also make another point. There is a misconception that just because you see the headlines saying something about X many of children were rescued or victims rescued, there's a misconception that just because a child is rescued, that child is safe. Let me explain. In this series of international raids, the children were put into third world countries institutions. And let me first give them the benefit of the doubt. These third world country, local law enforcement, they did not know what to expect when they stormed these compounds. They may not have known there was 30 to 75 kids in these compounds. They may not have had the resources for them. Okay. Now, sometimes worse tragedies happened to these children while they were in these institutions than the type of abuse they were otherwise experiencing, to the extent that some babies died in those institutions. So point one, just because a child is rescued does not mean a child is safe. I've spoken to survivors who had headlines come out in the United States that were, quote, rescued, aka arrested for prostitution, as a 15-year-old child being trafficked in the United States. And the headlines came out the next morning saying X amount of children rescued from trafficking. And by the time those headlines came out, after they had been questioned at the police station, they were walked out the front door of the police station and handed a card to a local shelter. And they were already back into the hands of their traffickers by the time those headlines came out the next morning. Point one, just because a child is rescued does not mean a child is safe. Point two, there are very few, if any, safe places to put these child victims in the United States. Now let's get back to this story for the sake of making some very important points. I'm going to fast forward about 2 years from the time these international raids happened. There was an international court case. Yes, there are court documents and all kinds of evidence. And on an international level, the judge acquitted this group. Never mind. You're innocent. Everyone can go home. Nobody was convicted. The children were all returned. Now, our story should have ended there, correct? This should be a victorious story of rescue, and we should have been able to have a childhood and go to school and get medical care. You get the point. Instead, what it did do, now yes, this is me being positive on purpose, it do is it made our environment less abusive than what my older siblings had experienced, because this group was forced into submission. They were forced to pretend to be less abusive. They were forced to quite literally burn the book and implement policies to be less abusive. I say this often. Awareness is not just a feel-good term when it comes to combating child trafficking. Awareness reduces the predator's ability to operate. Awareness makes it harder for bad guys to do bad things to children and get away with it. Awareness means we the people are walking around in public aware of what to look for and what to do, and we can protect children, maybe even prevent more children from having to suffer through this unimaginable trauma. Awareness puts the responsibility in our hands to acknowledge this is a problem. This is not okay. We will not be the generation that allows this to continue thriving. We will be the generation to end it. Now back to that story. Although that was corruption at the international level, although the United States government and every other government failed us, it reduced the predator's ability to operate. I was in Brazil at that time. The closest race to me was in Argentina, a continent, totally different country. The others were all around the world in different continents. Even though that didn't happen to the compound I was living in at the time, it sent a shockwave, a ripple effect throughout this entire organization, which made it harder for bad guys to do bad things to kids my age and younger as we were growing up. Your actions matter. Now, I'm going to fast forward this story until I was 10 to 14 years old, because for 4 years of my childhood, we lived in Harris County, Houston, Texas. And for those who don't know, Harris County is actually the main, probably the biggest hotspot for human trafficking in our country. Did you guys know that the district attorney of Harris County will still refuse to prosecute child traffickers? Did you guys know that was happening back then and it's still happening today? Did you guys know that we can vote out corrupted officials? So, for 3 years of my childhood, I was in Harris County, Houston, Texas, and every single week I worked on the streets, in restaurants, in shopping centers, in grocery stores, in famous landmarks like the Georgia Brown Convention Center, the Astrodome, a lot of other famous places. I interface with city council members and with hundreds of thousands of people every single week. And from the age of 10 to 14 years old, I did not look any older. I was not maybe 17 or 18. I was obviously a child, sometimes on the street. And guess what? During those 4 years, not even one person, not even one law enforcement officer had the courage, the awareness to ask me if I was okay, to check on this child and say, what are you doing here? Are you okay? You go to school? Why aren't you in school? Have you eaten today? Where are your parents? Now, I was asked all kinds of questions about which denomination and where I was debated specifically by Christians. But nobody offered to help. And here's the thing, in my story, it's pretty complicated because, like I said, I was born and raised into this environment, meaning, yeah, my parents were that evil, and they thought it was a good idea to produce us for this environment and make money off us in this environment. But even if one person could have asked some questions, they could have reduced the predator's ability to operate. That means I might have spent less time on the street. I might have been able to go to school. I might have been able to get medical care. It also means tens of thousands of other children like me in this same group all over the world could have spent less time on the street, could have had some semblance of a childhood. Your actions matter. And don't think for a second that little old you can't do something meaningful to impact this. Here's my call to action. Yes, let's acknowledge this is the worst form of evil. This is dark. This is not okay. Let's also acknowledge that it's unacceptable for grown adults to be unwilling to think about the ways children are being harmed by this and to allow their fear to hold them back from taking action. Now, I'm not here to unpack all the gruesome details for you, and you don't need to know them. You don't need to go research them. It doesn't help. You need to do something. I'm asking you, please, pick one thing you can do to be part of the solution. Yes, our elected officials are responsible. Yes, they should do better. Yes, our borders. Yes, yes, yes. But And they won't, therefore we must. They refuse, therefore it's up to we the people. It helps no one to say, oh, but that my guy will do it next time. Oh, but he talked about it once. Oh, but he tried and they wouldn't let him. No, let's acknowledge the truth. All of them have failed us. All of them have failed us. If they wanted to, they would, but they don't. Let's stop pretending like someone else will solve this problem for us. Let's take the responsibility to do our part. Now, I'm not asking you to get off your couch and put your life at risk on the front lines combating child trafficking like I am, but I'm asking you to do something. So fast forward to today. I've been working with various nonprofits to combat this issue in the United States. One of them is called Veterans for Child Rescue. We work with local and federal law enforcement to conduct counter-trafficking operations where we arrest the buyers. Now, to Chris's earlier point, is that enough? Absolutely not. To Chris's earlier point, if the federal government wanted to do something about this, they would. Now, I'm going to be very balanced and realistic here in my approach because I've worked with a lot of law enforcement officers. I'm going to let you guys know it's not on the law enforcement officers to do something. It's at the leadership level. I have worked with and talked to so many law enforcement officers who care, whose eyes will water up and cry when we talk about this, but they are ordered not to do something about it. They are not permitted to do something about it. They're not even offered the training to do something about this when they counter it. Back to my point, this problem is intentional. It's not at the local law enforcement officers level. It's not the agents in these three-letter agencies. It's the leadership. It's their superiors that not only are not trying, they won't let the good guys get the bad guys. Why? Because it's too profitable. Because they're either compensated to turn a blind eye and or are part of the problem. Either way, they're guilty. Either way, that's unacceptable. Either way, I come back to my point. This problem is intentional, and it's up to we the people to do something about it. So with this nonprofit, we are doing things the way the legal system requires, which is quite honestly ineffective, meaning not only are we going after the lowest predators on the totem pole that we're allowed to go after, that we won't be blocked from going after, but even when we get tons, like an abundance of incriminating evidence on these predators, often, more often than not, the warrants aren't even issued, the arrests aren't even made. Even if they're put behind bars, they get let out. So I co-founded a nonprofit called Uniting America. The website is unitingamericainc.org. My co-founder and I are combating child trafficking, and we are building a survivor center for the children that we rescue because we must and because there's no safe place to put children. My co-founder is a former independent contractor for the United States. He was assigned to a lot of counter-trafficking operations and anti-corruption. During the time he was assigned to these projects, he was not allowed to stop the bad guys. He resigned in 2021. He worked under both the Obama and the Trump administration. The terrible things he saw to humans and specifically to children, he would not continue with. He resigned, and now him and his team are taking care of the bad guys in the only way that's effective to take care of them. And my role is to advocate, it's to raise public awareness, it's to be a voice for the voiceless, because there are way too many children who, like me, deserve to have advocates who won't let their fear get in the way, who won't use excuses to not join the fight, who will do something. We're building a survivor center because these children deserve support, because the government does not provide support, and because we all know that many of these organizations that are supposed to protect children or foster them are often quite harmful for them, aka we often have to find them and rescue them again within a few months. So we're building a regenerative farm. It's a place where these children can find peace and trauma-informed therapy and heal and be protected. My co-founder and I are sponsoring all of this out of our own pocket. Rhetorical question, why? Why won't the people who can help? Why isn't everybody pouring their resources into fighting this issue? If the government won't do their part, we the people must. And once again, I'm not asking you to inconvenience your entire life or quit your current career to do this, not only for free, but put your own time and money and resources into this 24/7 mission. I'm asking you to pick one way you can do something to help. I'm asking you not to be tolerant of this evil. I'm asking us to stop coexisting with this evil and stop making excuses for our elected officials who choose to do nothing. I'm going to ask you, instead of consuming media about what XYZ celebrity is wearing to XYZ event, I'm asking you to not be distracted and divided and disunited by this propaganda that is distracting us from this problem. I'm asking you to hold your local and federal elected officials accountable. I'm asking you to demand answers. I'm asking you to do your part. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. And I know for sure that it matters. I know for sure that saving one child matters. Saving 10 children, 100, 1,000. I'm letting you know that matters more than you could ever realize. I'm letting you know it sends a shockwave throughout the network, the organization. I'm letting you know we could bring this whole thing down in our generation, in our country. I'm letting you know I'm not going away. I'm not going to be silent. I'm getting louder. And I'm letting you know that there are two teams in this fight. There's Team Protect Children. There's Team Turn a Blind Eye, be part of the corruption, and pretend like it's going away. I'm letting you know that Team 2, that makes you just as guilty. Yes, I'm pretty hard about this. I'm hoping this comes across with all the love I can muster, but I'm letting you know that ignorance is a choice. Doing nothing is a choice. Ignoring this is not helping children. It's not making the bad guys go away. It's allowing this to thrive. So Chris, thank you for being one of the very few who are willing to not only talk about this, but inspire other people to take action. If we could all inspire our communities, our churches, our elected officials, our school boards, to not only make sounds with their mouth, but to do something, not only would we reduce the predator's ability to operate, we could change this whole dynamic. What if we, the people, were truly aware? What if we, the people, made our communities intolerant to predators? What if our generation was the one to end this?
I think a couple of themes have
Chris,
come
I don't
through.
know how much more.
It's very good, thank you. We got a few more minutes here real quick, but I think a few themes have come through on this show. And I think the first theme is that there is I guess I will call it a disinformation campaign that exists to keep us in the foggy, gray, dark. So we don't see this nightmare in the stark terms that we need to in order to solve it. That cannot be a coincidence. We continue to see our corporate media. They steer us in the wrong direction over and over again. And it just seems like there is an element in our society that simply does not want our problems fixed. And I think that that's why Kim's, her passion is coming through. Because it simply requires a cynical mind, I guess is what I'm trying to say, a constructively critical mind to decipher through all of the disinformation and get to the real issue. I think the other theme coming through is that these groups that, whether the cartels or something that Kim described, which seems like a high-level Western group, okay, these groups that run these secret associations, they are connected at the highest levels of government. And that just simply puts more on our shoulders. We have our work cut out for us. They are putting us in a bind, putting us in a pinch. And ultimately, I have one message that comes through over and over again, which is it all starts local. Everything is local. It starts with your local county officials. It is amazing how quickly you can get change done at the county level, and how that is the beginning to eradicating these problems all the way to the top. We have a few minutes here, Kim. I want to say a couple more things. I think the one thing Kim said is that these children, when they're stuck in these situations, I want to give one example of misinformation that's put on us regularly. These children are put in these situations and they have no outlets. They have nowhere to go. You're a child, right? And Kim was in a foreign country, or even in this country, there's oftentimes these children have nowhere to go, even in a free country. And I want you to think about a concept that was put on us, which was the unaccompanied minor, right? The concept of an unaccompanied minor, which is a propaganda term that was used to allow our border to be sprung wide open by the establishment. And what that is this idea that a child, that life is so hard in the South American and Central American countries, that children the age of 10 or 9 or 8 decide to make a trek across one of the most dangerous deserts in mankind on planet Earth. It is absurd. It is absurd. There is no child that chooses to make that trek. Those children are being delivered. They're being delivered. And so I think that we really have our work cut out for us, because there's a lot of mind games going on. Kim, we got like 2 minutes here. You want to finish up with anything?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a whole other topic, but the southern border, look, for 10 years of my life, I lived in Mexico. I crossed that border more than any child should, specifically any American child. There's a whole lot of misinformation about what's happening, but the shortest way I can say it, it's also an intentional problem, because it would not be thriving without the participation of both sides. I want people to know it's not necessarily getting worse. It's always been this way. It's always been bad, and it's always been used for political theatrics. I want people to see past the propaganda that they're told to think on those screens and devices you're watching. I want you to realize it's bad for humans. Yes, it would not be thriving without the participation of both sides. And yes, this is not a problem they're willing to solve. It's a problem they are profiting from, benefiting from, and using for their political and power gain. Therefore, we the people must demand better. In general, I could subcategorize every single topic here, but it comes down to this problem is intentional, and it's up to us to do something about it.
There was a meeting in Fort Bend County over the weekend, a political activist, conservative, constitutionalist meeting, and this topic came up, and there was a lot of good content. People are becoming aware, but one of the things that people said is that there are these safe houses, and these exist. I don't know. I understand a lot of them. They exist one every 10 square miles or something of that sort, and that's where these nefarious things are happening. And there's a reluctance for law enforcement to go break these houses down. Do you have any quick comment on that, Kim?
Sometimes worse things happen in the government processing centers on our side of the river. Then worse things happen when these children and people are funneled in buses, trucks, trains, planes, etc., into the United States on behalf of our government. It's difficult for me to play stupid, and it's important for us to face the truth. I'm not saying there's any stupid questions when it comes to this. I'm saying we the people are being lied to. Truth matters, and most importantly, action is what counts. Faith without works is dead. We must do something.
And with that being said, thank you very much, Kim. Appreciate everyone's time. This is the Chris Heasley Show. We will be here every Monday at 10 a.m. Next Monday, we will be the topic will be inflation and all of the hardships that come with this new economy being put on us by the globalists.